So with about 50% of English news audience with us on a weekly basis on the general news, over 50% actually when you add Times Now and Mirror Now, and almost 35% of the business news. Times Network has been practically ruling the English news space for a long time now. While that is something that we work towards, invest into, and really toil, and it is good for our business, we also realize that this actually creates, at an integrated level, a platform that has a lot more power than just being a great business for us and bring a great service to our viewers. We believe that this power, this great power, needs to be used with the responsibility that comes with it. We believe that if people like you, all of us, follow this network can also probably work towards setting an agenda that can dovetail all our energies to work towards nation building, which I think is a very, very important priority for this generation because we have a lot of catching up to do. I think this generation of people who are leading India, the decision makers of India, is distinct from previous generations, as we call them, the passive optimists, people who used to sort of be happy with life and used to always think that the future is going to be good, but not really ready to do much about it. And that's what has been replaced by people like us here, all of you here. The English viewer, the decision maker in India, is probably the most aggressive demographic group in the world today. The Indian is probably the most aggressive, the most unrelenting and demanding of everything that we talk about, whether it is the quality or quantity of infrastructure and so on and so forth. We have decided to have this panel as a slight departure. Before we start the conclave, we wanted to start this panel because here, ladies and gentlemen, are the bunch of people who actually are driving the network and therefore opinion amongst India's decision makers. I mean, these are the people who actually are driving the network and therefore the editorial agenda of the network. So I will take this opportunity to talk to each one of them and get their perspective on what is, what are the impediments to this so-called 5 trillion agenda, as well as their views would be very, very interesting to you because they are, as a matter of their profession, interacting on a daily basis with the people who are decision makers of the highest order in India. I think before I get into the specifics, let me start with introducing Mihir Bhatt. Mihir is the chief curator of this conclave. He's the content manager of this conclave. So let me ask him as to what is the aim and objective of India Economic Conclave, this one and the future ones, and what was the guiding principle and factors that went into deciding the content topics and the panel for today and for the benefit of viewers and our audience here.
Yeah. So Anand, we had two choices, one option was when we were planning India Economic Conclave, one option was that we look at maybe global stars or celebrities, get them to talk here and, have a nice, huge conclave. The second option, and being Times Network, which is our responsibility also, is actually to bring out topics or issues which matter for the growth of the country. So we felt that while India is growing at 7%, what has also happened globally is that since China has slowed down, by default, we have become the fastest growing economy today. But nobody today is talking about double-digit growth that maybe 5-7 years back we were referring to. I mean, if I can quote Mr. Manmohan Singh, the earlier Prime Minister, he once quoted that we need to unleash the animal spirit. But today nobody is talking about that. Everybody is saying that we are fastest growing and all. But at 7%, is it enough? That was the basic question that we asked. And like Mr. Vaidyanathan also mentioned in his address, that while we are expecting that India will become a $5 trillion economy and enter in that global big five, maybe by 2028 if we don't do anything at all. How can we as a network create a platform where we start an ongoing conversation about how we can fast track that and how we can address some of the most core and basic issues which are relevant for a country like India, be it poverty, be it education, be it social upliftment, be it the real trickling down of effect of a fastest growing economy to the last man in the queue. That was the basic thought.
Thanks, Mihir. 5 trillion is not just a number. 5 trillion is an objective which will force us to grow faster, because that growth is essential to ensure we lift people out of poverty. I mean, that's really what it is about. Otherwise, it's not just a vanity statement to be a $5 trillion economy. Supriya, we have broken out of the 5% growth, or the so-called Hindu rate of growth, as I said, and come to the 7% band. When you look at the numbers over the last almost 20 years now, after 1999, which was, I think, 5.5%, we have been around the 7% band for a long time, and clearly that's not enough. But despite some of the best minds working on this in the current government and in the previous decades, we have not been able to break out of this ceiling. What do you think holds us back?
In one word, politics. If I may elaborate on that further, I think lack of planning. I think we've been speaking about agriculture all morning here, where he spoke about it, the Chief Minister spoke about it. If 70 to 80% of our population at one time was involved in agriculture, one never really saw the numbers. 80% of those farmers have land holdings that are less than 1 hectare. It was never going to be a remunerative occupation. It was never going to be sustainable. We did not plan all these years to move people out of agriculture. It's very well intentioned to say we will double farm incomes, but those farm incomes are not going to double if 60, 70% will continue to be involved in what is not going to be a remunerative exercise. So agriculture, the emphasis on that, trying to take people out of it and putting them into far more remunerative professions should have been the key. I think our huge dependence on oil, our economy, we oscillate between oil being a tailwind and a headwind. I think a huge dependence on oil, the fact that we've got these great offshore assets, and the fact that they were marred in controversy instead of really harnessing them, that. And I think somewhere, you referred to passive optimism. Somewhere that passive optimism, things will take care. 7% is perhaps enough. 7% is never going to be enough for a nation that will have the youngest population in 2-3 years down the line. We've got to grow at higher numbers. But the sad part of our growth is that in countries like Europe, where people squabble over the future of economies and the future of growth, we in India squabble over the past rates of growth across governments. So I think politics has a lot to do with where we are today.
Faye, even with farm loan waivers in some states and increase in MSP, farmer distress is continuously in the news over the last few quarters. I mean, is this politically motivated by the opposition, or is there real distress? Because you have been on the ground with Mirror now, and what are the real issues?
So I think the fact that in the cities we even ask if the farmer distress is politically motivated shows how perhaps disconnected we are as urban Indians from what's happening in rural India. Thousands of farmers have committed suicide just this year. The count is above 6,000 according to the Agriculture Minister. Nobody kills themselves for politics. Nobody kills themselves to make any one political party look good or bad. Our team has traveled through most of the big agricultural states, including Maharashtra, met with farmers, met with tribal farmers. There is acute distress across the country. Farmers have, there are different stages or different types of farmers, and there are problems in every stage. There are those who grow vegetables who are just not even recovering what they invest in every cycle. There are those who have lost the breadwinner because they've committed suicide. There are those who are in debt. The farm distress, as I believe we discovered yesterday during the election results as well, is a very, very real thing. And with, like Supriya said, and I completely agree with her, with such a large population of our country dedicated to farming, it's something we cannot ignore. What we've also done is we traveled in states where we have currently demands for reservation, and we've had protests demanding reservation, the Marathas, the Gujars, the Jats. We've discovered a lot of that is linked to jobs and farming. These are children of farmers who no longer find farming viable, who no longer can find jobs because we haven't created enough jobs in our states. And that is why we've now got a fresh demand for reservation in several states. So fundamentally, it is about finding various layers of solutions for our farmers and creating jobs for the young people that Supriya was talking about.
Faye, I just want to go a little more into that question because I have been a small project of a farming enterprise which failed in the last 3-4 years. And I therefore quite closely work with a few people in village outside of Bombay here. I mean, when we looked at some numbers when we were developing India Development Debate position, we saw something which is, which was quite startling, and it was quite surprising, in fact, that when we look at India's farmer suicides, we look at it as an integrated, consolidated number of around 5,000 to 6,000, sometimes 7,000 in certain years. But I don't think people have looked at the state-wise distribution of suicides. The state-wise distribution of suicides show that there are very, very little suicides in states like Punjab, in states like Haryana, Uttar Pradesh, Bihar, West Bengal, Assam, Northeast states, even Orissa. The suicides are mainly in Maharashtra, Madhya Pradesh, Andhra Pradesh, Karnataka, including places like Tamil Nadu and Kerala. This is basically the monsoon footprint of India. The snow-fed rivers of India are perennial and almost perennial, and summers don't really sort of hit them. So it is actually a case of rainwater management and not a case of farm loan waivers or anything as such. India has traditionally been a groundwater civilization. Do you think we should sort of continuously be looking up at some political or some government intervention, or the farmers in India are not really doing enough? Because when you look at them, they are steeped in superstition. They absolutely are looking at handouts. When you look at a place like Israel, for instance, which is in worse arid desert conditions, they have done the best sort of use of various technologies, including sort of drip irrigation and the like. Do you think, therefore, that the farmers are actually sort of to blame for their distress?
Absolutely not. The interventions that have to come from technology, from any sort of changes that you're talking about, needs to come through education. These are interventions that need to come through governments. I completely agree with Supriya that this is not a problem that came up in the last 2 or 3 years. Various governments over the last several decades have pushed our farmers into the situations that they are in today. We failed to provide education, we failed to provide healthcare, we failed to provide banking services to our farmers. You could link the farm suicides to the monsoons, or you could link them to the fact that they're borrowing money from money lenders instead of from the formal banking system. So when the monsoon fails them, or the rains come at the wrong part of the year, and they're unable to pay that loan, that's when you have the suicides. Or when they fall terribly sick and they're unable to pay for healthcare, that's when you have suicides. So these sort of interventions have been studied. The solutions are available on the tables of various governments 2006 onwards. The Swaminathan Commission report has been available to governments. They have not been implemented. What has been done is UPA 1 onwards, farm loan waivers have been offered as lollipops at every election as a steroid to buy time, and then 4 years later say we're still working on it. Just yesterday, the Congress promised a farm loan waiver to the Chhattisgarh state. 10 days after the new chief minister comes in, they don't have an answer of where the money is going to come from or how they're going to make this happen. It is an election gimmick that parties shamelessly use over and over again, where nobody wants to actually solve the problem or get to the root of the problem. So I don't believe we're in a position to say our farmers are not doing enough, because there is very little they have not already tried.
Thanks, Faye.
Anand, if I may add a line there, have we somewhere also treated our farming community as a burden and not as a partner in economic growth? As a liability, really?
I didn't get that.
I'm saying, haven't we treated our farmers or farming community as a liability and not as equal partners in economic growth? Successive governments.
I think, treating anybody as a liability or, or something lesser is not, probably in the grain, in the whole texture of democracy. And India has, let us accept it, it has been a democracy. Uh, I really would sort of blame the people and the farmers themselves to a large extent because, when you really work with them, you realize there's a lot of superstition and there's a lot of tradition which guides their actual behavior on the ground. Accepting new technology, accepting even, what actually the government and leaders are offering them, comes with a lot of resistance. But I think we'll have to sort of move a little faster now. So I think my point is, and I'm also a biologist, I genuinely believe that the environment creates the organism and not the other way around. There is a general tendency to blame the politician, blame the government, blame the leader. I think if the people change, the leaders will automatically and naturally have to change. Having said that, let me move to the markets.
If I may, I'm sorry, I can't let that go. If I may, we're all descendants of farmers on some level. And the reason why you and I can sit here and have this conversation is because there was an intervention of education for several generations in each of our families that brings us to a point where we can then decide that we want to give up superstition for technology.
I just want to
that
say that
intervention
the entire human species has been agriculturist. We are all agriculturists. But agriculturists, technologists, politicians, whoever, people when they have a tradition fixation, people when they are looking at what was culture and what was right, and therefore why I should continue with it even when I'm shown the right thing. There is a bit of a holding on to the past that we have as a people. Nikunj, getting to the markets, you're probably India's foremost champion of equity, mutual funds, and hero of the Aam Aadmi investor with a major role to play in the SIP revolution that the country is now witnessing. We've done Jan Nivesh, I don't know how many people know, which is now the world's largest investor education program, and Nikunj has a lot to do with that. It has also been our biggest defense against global FII movements in the last 1 year. The current, and you're a champion of the markets, the current market cap to GDP ratio is still not at 2008 levels, even in spite of a lot of this. How much catch-up still remains? I mean, how much growth still remains?
Anand, whereas, we can always find fault lines, but if I really have to throw in that wave of optimism, are we doing better than the world in terms of GDP? The answer to that is yes. Can we do better? The answer to that is yes. Do we have potential to do much better? The answer to that is absolutely yes. Now, what pains me is that the Aam Aadmi in India is actually not believing in what India is really capable of. India's biggest private bank is owned by foreigners. India's biggest FMCG company is owned by foreigners. India's biggest liquor company, Anand, liquor company is also owned by foreigners. I guess what we must understand is that India has a potential to grow. It is just that we need to believe in it. Indians have been investing in fixed deposits. We've been investing in real estate. We've been investing in gold, which in a sense has been unproductive. I guess it's high time, we start looking ourselves and start believing in what we're capable of. Look at the kind of world-class companies we managed to create: TCS, Infosys, Reliance. So I guess somewhere if we look inside and say, look, do we believe in what Indians are capable of delivering? The answer to that is yes. Less than 3% of Indian savings is going back into equities. So for a vibrant economy, Anand, the flow of credit is very, very important. And the minute we as Indians start believing in the true entrepreneurship of what India is capable of, I guess we will see a very definitive trend in liquidity availability. Just to give it back with some numbers here. 5 years ago, every morning I would look at one data, which is what foreigners are doing. Gora kya le raha hai, Gora kya bech raha hai. Today in the morning when I come and see, I don't look at FI data, we look at the DI data. And for those who don't have started the SIPs right now, please start. Again, I'm advocating SIPs here because that is the endorsement of believing in India. So for me, believe, I think, is the ecosystem which we need to create. And with belief, I guess productivity and other things will be taken care of.
Thanks, Nikunj. Navika, now you are probably the best expert today in India to, besides the political experts that you will be grilling through today onwards. Let me ask you with this question. With yesterday's election results and a new RBI governor, is there a possibility of populism getting center stage in the run-up to the Lok Sabha election? Will there be laxity in fiscal deficit control, which was, one of the things that the current, top management at the government level has been proud of? Will that sort of go lax?
Well, Anand, all I can tell you is what yesterday's results actually teach us. It's not actually yesterday's results because Madhya Pradesh counting was going on till this morning. And it was so close to call that nobody was hazarding a guess, including the political parties not staking claim till they knew where they stood. So we've been up all night trying to not decipher political parties, but trying to salute the voter of India. And the voter of India today has shown that whether he's in the rural areas, whether he's a distressed farmer, whether he's a distressed trader or somebody doing very well, wherever, in whichever category he is, the voter of India knows what's best for India. That's the way he has voted in these 5 state elections, and that's the warning signal that's gone on to all political parties that this is the intelligent voter who's going to take a call in the 2019 elections for the Lok Sabha. Coming back to the issue of profligacy, I think it's too late for the top management in the government to now think of any lollipops. I just interviewed the finance minister 2 weeks ago on the same issue of the RBI governor. At that time, the RBI governor hadn't resigned, now he has. But the finance minister is on record to say that any discussion that they were having with the RBI for the assets that the RBI is sitting on is not for current use. In the current year, they are not going to be touching any of those reserves. So lollipops, I don't think is going to happen. So fiscal deficit discipline, I think maybe just a little off the 3.3% to GDP mark, but somewhere around there, because this government, so far at least, has taken very seriously how the international community views India and rates India in its major parameters. Why we see the evidence of this is how they've worked on the ease of doing business and getting India up there. So the fact is that financially, there is no leg room for profligacy, and politically, I think there is no sense because the voter of India understands when things are being done for his long-term benefit and when they are being actually, if I can use the word loosely, being bribed only before elections.
So let me just ask you one small question before I move on to Akrita. Is, the large part of the Hindi heartland has spoken yesterday. And although anti-incumbency is looking like a very, very important factor there, it also indicates that even with a very, very heavy or very strong support by Yogi Adityanath as one of the lead campaigners, the voters has sort of spoken in a slightly different manner. So do you think the Ram Mandir issue is going to take back seat and real issues will have to now become the Lok Sabha plank?
Well, Anand, it's very clear 69% of Yogi Adityanath's constituency rallies have ended up in BJP losing those seats. That's the statistics of this election. 69% of the places where Yogi Adityanath went, polarized, communalized, spoke about Ram Mandir, spoke about changing names of places, he was booed by the electorate. That's the statistic, and that's a statistic I can assure you is what is being poured over even as we speak. Amit Shah, the party president of the BJP, is holding a meeting with his top brass right now to analyze where they're going wrong. But one thing I can tell you, even in the run-up to elections, every BJP leader was very, very watchful of making no commitments on Ram Mandir. People still want roti, kapda or makan. And now they've added to that list a Naukri. Naukri, till that happens, this voter is not going to forgive anybody, and that's where the buck is going to stop.
Thanks, Navika. I'm sorry, there is real pressure now. Akrita.
I hope you realize how we anchor our shows and how we need more time
To take breaks.
on our shows.
We are paying back him in penny.
Akrita.
Akrita,
Akrita.
this is the first time I guess editors can actually grill the CEO. That's real pressure. It's the other way around.
To get the editors together.
Yeah. So Times Now News has, from practically being a complete outsider and a non-entity last year, probably in my last 3 decades in media, I have not seen a single national brand go up so fast. It has reached 6 crore viewers per month last month and is now the #3 digital platform. It's actually, its viewership is now equal to or larger than the broadcast platform. So Times Now channel has competition from Times Now Digital. And Akrita is the person who's led that. And I'm going to ask her just one question before we wrap up. She's basically talking to the younger audience. She's talking to that so-called 28-year-old who's going to be India. Millennial interest and their views about India is what I want to know. I think this is a generation, and I have one at home, which probably has achieved Achedin in reality. With smartphone penetration, access to information, entertainment, connectivity, news, and educational, substitution is something that this generation is just taking for granted, and it's sort of only increasing. And even in villages, this is happening. What is this going to do to the so-called demographic dividend, which we have, for some time not been talking about? Because this is an empowered generation. And what have you seen are those things that interest them, which you are working with to sort of achieve these numbers?
Well, I think the first thing about the 5 trillion economy that we're talking about and the millennials that you're talking about, that they're empowered, they're entitled, I think 1 trillion of the 5 trillion economy is going to come from the digital economy. And it is these millennials who will be the engines to drive this 1 trillion economy. What are the areas where these youngsters can be working in?
Are they positive? Do they sort of have the same concerns?
Of course. The point that you're talking about the millennial, and I'll tell you where they can be accommodated and where it's the startups, it's the e-commerce opportunities where they'd be looking at working in e-services. There are at least 3 or 4 major things that a digital space does. What does it do? It enables you to inform and educate people. It enables you to entertain people. It enables you to empower people. If India takes this opportunity and the millennials work in these fields, we could be the digital factory of the world. The second point that I wanted to make is the studies about the 4th industrial revolution, and this is the real opportunity for the millennials and where they're really interested in, is in terms of whether it's internet services, whether it's artificial intelligence, robotics, big data, and how you're going to enable these people. It's going to be by skilling these millennials to take this opportunity. That's one. But I cannot, resist saying this, that what she was talking about, rural India, and he was talking about credit. And that gets combined is that we cannot forget the millennials in the rural countryside. At the moment, we have a 35 to 37% internet penetration in rural areas. That's going to double in the next few years. The real opportunity is going to be in that area, as well as what Mr. Vaidyanathan was talking about a little bit earlier about opening a new financial ecosystem. It's when, what Nikunj said, credit goes to the last person. Don't forget the millennials who are still not empowered in the rural areas, and they will drive that growth for you.
That's great and good news, in fact, that there is a lot more headroom, and I can see that actually happen in the farm areas where people are just now moving from non-smartphone to smartphones and are really, really looking at, oh, how can Google Maps help me with something? Or how can, taking a simple picture and sending somebody else actually help in communication, etc.
To that, can I add that the next election, if the last election was fought on Twitter, this election will be a WhatsApp election. And messaging that goes on WhatsApp is really going to determine voter moods. So this is digital India, which will decide who it will pay back to.
I think this is all good news. And with that, I will have to sort of close because there is a very, very interesting next session waiting for you to happen. And that person has been waiting for some time, and that's the reason I've been pushed. So I can guarantee you that's going to be probably even more gripping, although I think this is very, very interesting. I would want to sort of continue to go on. Thank you very much, and welcome once again to India Economic Conclave 2018.